Hello.
Hi, everybody. Good morning from West Coast, where it is a very sunny morning. As you can see, the light is cascading in. And I know some of you are in different time zones. So hello, I'm calling from, or I'm Zooming from what is unceded Tongva land, bordering Chumash land. And we are going to begin this conversation. Oh, I forgot that this chat is happening. So also feel free, folks, to respond in the chat. I'm a very call and response type person. And I would be excited if some of you had already attended the critical media literacy slow factory open EDU that we did a couple years ago, to see how continues to resonate with you, or any questions you might have. And we're going to use that foundation, as you'll see, to begin to talk about a new framework that I'm trying to explore to think through some of the work that I have been a part of. Okay, there we go. So yeah, creative media literacy. What is this? Also, before I begin that, I want to say that I am so excited to be in this conversation again with the Slow Factory community and the team. I have been ideating with this team for a couple of years now around presentations, articles, and as you will see later, co-launch of videos that are part of this creative media literacy concept and practice that I'm interested in producing. So what I want us to think about with this is, I'm going to go deeper, so don't worry about it, what critical and creative are in relationship to each other within this field called media literacy. And we're going to do a recap anyways of the critical media literacy lecture. It won't be that long. You do have access to it on the Slow Factory site. Well, actually, let's go back for a second so you could see the game plan for today. Critical media literacy recap. I'm going to delve deeper in this concept that I have named dual vision. So you'll see what the foundations for creative media literacy are. So that's why I didn't really define it in the beginning right now, because we're scaffolding. We're going to offer two case studies, or I'm going to offer two case studies. Oh, by the way, and it should have said this on my title, I go by she, her pronouns. And I had this moment, I'm just going to be honest with you all, as I was putting this together, because I'm still trying to think through the parameters of how I'm talking about and defining creative media literacy, what I would be in conversation with you all about. And please do feel free to throw questions into the chat, and we'll also have a Q&A moment. But I had to contend that I actually have a lot of professional experience putting into practice what I'm going to be writing about. And so I've noticed that happens a lot in my life, that I do the practice sometimes before the theory, and the theory emerges when I'm trying to understand the patterns of that behavior or that contribution to the world. So I said, what better place to demonstrate creative media literacy than look at the work that I have produced? Okay, so critical media literacy. This is a very, I don't want to say common, but it is part of a discourse in academia, in a field of media literacy that people would tag either more progressive or more radical. And radical here, we mean going to the root of the root. We're not talking about radicalism within a counterterrorism framework or an American political spectrum around what the radical is, as we're talking about the media, the way traditional, conventional mainstream media talks about radicals or radicalism. Critical, as you'll see, is a title that frequently precedes a field of study to indicate that there is a power analysis, that there is a deeper engagement around those power relations, and a tackling from mostly a leftist point of view. And so I asked several questions here, as you see. What are the reasons for our confidence in certain media outlets or social media accounts? What what we were looking at too was how media literacy as a field talks about what that is, and then who came up with critical media literacy. I think we'll go into that in a second. And it was mostly actually education scholars from UCLA, so a group of people who were kind of the champions of this, named Douglas Kellner and Jeff Scher. And it was also taken on by different universities who have projects like the Critical Media Project at USC. And they were devoted to looking at this relationship between media and this media ecology and audience, and what power looked like between those relationships. So this is a quote that was a part of the presentation: critical media literacy helps bridge the gap between theory and practice, by Junot. And actually, did I forget to put this? Might be in another slide. It's in my creative media literacy slide. So surveying the field, I thought about ways that I understood this relationship between us as the consumers and the conventional media outlets, including social media, including other ways that media is diffused. But what I wanted to also incorporate in this analysis was us, not just as passive participants, but active agents in the making of media as well. And our literacy in the making of media is actually part of how we produce media. I did start with this premise that media is never neutral. We're going to go into that in a second. But this idea that media is objective, that there is an unbiased middle where information and knowledge comes from and is produced tabula rasa, or produced from some sort of source that is so far from the information that they're producing facts, is something that I wanted to disabuse us of. And the way that we could have what I understand as a richer, critical discussion of media is to actually go beyond this truth and fact paradigm, what we call a normative paradigm, and to arrive at places that are not attached to whether or not something is good or bad, but a comprehensive analysis of what is happening. And so to do that, I sit from the vantage point of the politics, the position, and the power of either the media entity that is producing the content or the content itself. And so came up with these two frameworks of source, the questions, critical questions you would ask to understand what is the source of this media content, and angle to also understand the politics, position, and power of the motivation and intention driving that material. And then this is the practice of it, which I had already mentioned, to abandon the normative model. Again, a lot of people in journalism school, I don't know if this is still being taught, are trained around how to create and make content objective. And there's this false notion that there can be an objective neutral media. And I love all your shout outs, by the way, in the chat of where you all come from. I think more often, or not more often, I shouldn't say that, what is beginning to be part of a discourse in journalism and producing content is the influence of our positionality and the ways that our positionality can contribute to a, again, richer discussion or storytelling of whatever we're engaging. Okay, so locate original sourcing. That's something that some communities online have responded to, and I believe, started with a lot of artists pushing back on the screenshotting and resharing of their content without properly crediting or sourcing. And then it expanded to us asking what that looks like when we have slideshows, these info slideshows. Where is all that information coming from? And now you'll see more often, Alak, they do such a great job when they do their book reports. At the very end has a citations page. And now that's become a little bit more of a conventional expected content when material is put out into the social media atmosphere. Question all sourcing. So even if I see citations, I'm still going to look that up before I'm not perfect. I don't always do this before I reshare. And again, I don't think about things as trusted sources. I point to sources as places, again, where you can say, oh, this is a scientific journal. This is a more mainstream scientific journal, but who are the authors on this? What does their methodology page look like as well, or their methodology section offer? And so, again, I think what I am most interested in is giving a deluge of information that can help craft a theory around the sourcing. So a lot of people talking about research, and research is not rule. That's another thing that we have to take into account. Doesn't mean that because some research has come out of either a community or a person, that's a rigid, set and fast. And as we'll see not too far in this presentation, there are so many ways that research we've had, either scientific or academic, has shifted throughout the course of history through different geographies. So it is not destiny. And then assess positionality and framing. Sorry, let's go. Let's see. Can I go back? Yeah, there we go. Assess positionality and framing. In this presentation, again, I encourage you to go either on YouTube or Slow Factory's page and look up the Critical Media Literacy lecture. It was about an hour long, so I'm breezing through this in 10 minutes. And also, we did a shorter video that is 10 minutes long that we're going to launch that goes over most of these components. I go into framing from the perspective of framing scholars, and I think it's fascinating. But as a quick and dirty, it's the way that arguments are positioned and how they create sometimes moral, what they call frames, or a moral universe that information operates within. And where that comes from, the position of who or what is offering the framing is crucial. And as you can see in the chat, Paloma linked to it. Okay, so dual vision, which I will talk about throughout this presentation, is something I've been playing with, inspired by this guy. Anybody know who this is? Well, I guess the book's a big hint. You know, when you are doing these presentations and the screens of people in their Zoom boxes and the chats are all over the place, sometimes you forget the layout of pictures. So Ibn Arabi was born in the 12th century, passed away in the 13th century, was depending on how you think about people spiritually, a Andalusian mystic poet, philosopher, Islamic scholar who has a incredible corpus of material that has been crucial to the traditions within what we call Sufism, Tasawwuf, and just Islam in general. And William Shittick, who is a scholar of Sufism, I think he's still at Stony Brook, but I know when he wrote this book, Ibn Arabi, Heir to the Prophets, he was a scholar there, studying Islam, researching it, writing about it. There's actually a really good book that he and another author put out. I think it's Vision of the World Islam, something like that. This book was really crucial to my academic trajectory, actually. In it, Shittik talks about Ibn Arabi's concept of what we were going to call critical mind and open heart, which again is part of one of these videos where I discuss this key terms project that I co-launched with Slow Factory and was funded by Pop Culture Collaborative. So what is the critical mind and open heart in the way that Ibn Arabi is thinking and talking about it? Well, I want you to visualize this spectrum of a critical mind on the side and a open heart on the other polarized side, I guess you could say. So it is a spectrum of belief. How do you think about your relationship to the divine? How do you act on it? How are you reproduced through it? And what he's basically arguing is that for people who live in the space of the critical mind, overly so, you are a skeptic. You have a critical way of engaging and assessing the world that, if relied on too much, and only if you're only cerebrally orienting to the world, creates a separation between you and the divine and can lead to this megalomaniac understanding of yourself as an omnipotent being, because you're so disconnected from the world of the divine, from the world of the created. You believe, in fact, that you are the one who is doing the creating. And of course, there are schools of thought, especially around consciousness, that maybe everything that is created is through our brain. But those sort of, what are they called? Scientific materialists, they might be in this category. Secularism might be in this category, but that's a more complicated discussion. And the open heart is a way of engaging with the divine that submerges, swims, and I'm sure you have tons of Sufi poetry to look at that speaks to this, in the sea of the divine. But they also do make a distinction by saying they're a drop in the ocean. And that's a crucial part, which is that the way Ibn Arabi is looking at these nodes in the spectrum of belief is that actually a synthesis of the critical mind and open heart are critical. Well, now I'm using critical, are crucial. They're vital for us to be able to see, to engage the world of the seen and the unseen. And the danger of being in, and I didn't explain this, the extremity of being only in the open heart is that you can't see yourself anymore. You are only the we, you are only the world of non-distinct boundaries. So it's almost like a me and we container that I call dual vision, because I imagine that we put on the glasses of seeing with those lenses. And it's almost like when you've gone to do an eye check, when they're starting to calibrate what is the lens that's going to work to sharpen your vision in the world, that we're tuning in the critical mind lens and we're tuning in the open heart lens. And as I said, if you want, you can hear about this a little bit more, because it is crucial to how I'm understanding what critical and creative media literacy looks like. And then here we are, creative media literacy. So again, this is part of that long discussion that I had a couple of years ago on the critical media literacy lecture with Slow Factory. What I started to break down this concept around was this quote by Malcolm X that kept on making the rounds during different moments where people were looking for a message like that, which it basically went, and I should have included this, when you turn I, or something about I, into illness, and then you put a we, you make illness into wellness. And so during the onset of the pandemic, this became a clarion call for people to think about what a collective response would be and not to isolate in these moments. However, It wasn't quite clear if Malcolm did say it, because I was running through some of these critical media literacy practices. What is the sourcing? Where did it come from? I couldn't really even find it, yet it made its presence be known on CNN, and even the Malcolm X Museum quoted it out. And I was just curious what it meant and looked like for us to put material into the world that is maybe misattributed, and psychologically what it means to be in this atmosphere of continuously sharing and resharing within the media ecology of sourcing that is not the case. Oh, I think folks are putting things. Oh, Ibn Arabi. Thank you, Suleiman, for giving some quotes from Ibn Arabi. Oops. This is when you're dealing with all these windows. So going back to Malcolm, it wasn't just Malcolm. It was a long history of it, and it didn't just only exist in the social media atmosphere. We were talking about Sufi poets, and again, why it's so important to remember that Ibn Arabi is within the tradition of Islamic thought, because a lot of what ended up being the medium for how people understood Rumi or Hafiz was through this new age perennialist lens of a decontextualized Sufi poet. So as another example of how content is extracted or misappropriated or misattributed, there have been a lot of writings about how the Rumi quotes that we have out into the world might not be Rumi quotes, and that somebody who has a really famous collection, Coleman Barks, is questionable because he was not a translator of Farsi, of Persian, and maybe him and Daniel Ladinsky, who also put out collections for Hafiz, might have actually inserted their own poetry into those collections and named it under Rumi and Hafiz so that they could use the popularity of these figures to get their work out into the world. So again, this is why it's important for us to delve deep into what sourcing looks like. Anyways, a thought partner of mine, Zahira Ali, and I were thinking about all of this. And again, how does this relate to creative media literacy, in how to think through not just the problem of the era, which has been an issue or a problematic practice that isn't just, again, in the social media moment, but what are ways that we can shift how we participate. And we came out with this belief that if we saw ourselves as the history makers, as the ones who, through the reshare, through the reproduction of this content, are part of this world of creative production, then maybe we can think a little bit more seriously about media literacy and use the tools of critical media literacy as foundations for how creative work can be conceptualized and produced. So as you can see, there's this long quote about our civic duty and shared obligation around that history making. And again, I'll just give you a vantage point because we're both historians, and we wrote this, was it last year? May 2021, I believe it's up there, published on Malcolm X's birthday, to think about this quote, but we delve a little bit deeper because we're historians, what it's like to be a historian and go archive digging in the world of content. Well, traditionally, what would historians look for? And that's a interesting question in of itself. Newspaper articles, magazines, they produce oral histories from living figures or figures that might have already passed and had those interviews. We might look at archaeological content. We might look at other primary sources and even secondary sources about a primary figure. But what are the sources for the now? are historians going to go through your Instagram page? Are they going to scour where a viral tweet came from? Is it the person that got the most shares or likes? It might be, again, this is why people have pushed back around folks who have maybe a lot of clout and steal people's ideas. How are they going to be able to find this? And I know people have, and some historians, actually, leftist historians, have thought about what blockchain could do and mean for the citational practice, and why a rigorous citational practice is so crucial for the longevity of traditions. And again, I think somebody mentioned here, First Nation people, Indigenous folks. Yeah, and the way the powers of knowledge production can and will erase you based on the meatiness, based on the robustness of content that's available. So we're crucial to that. And being history makers, there's a field called historiography, how history is produced, is part of the work of even creative media literacy. And I have this quote from Toni Morrison's that we also included in the article, and The Price of Wealth, the Cost of Care, that all of us, struggle to turn data into information, into knowledge, and we hope into wisdom. In the process, we owe everything to others. So also, what for me is embedded in this creative media literacy practice is really a collective notion of how knowledge is shared and produced. Okay. So let's go to a case study in how this framework of critical media literacy and creative media literacy is, how does it come from? So for the advertisement of this talk, I'm sure you saw, this is, thank you, Celine, and team for being the brains around this meme share. I love me a good caption meme share. This is from the first season, it might be episode 3, I think it was, where Uncle Nassim is introduced on the show Rami, which I'm currently a co-executive producer on and a writer. What is really the hallmark, and sorry, there are spoilers here, so spoiler alert about some of these episodes. We're going into Rami Strawberries from season 1, and then Ariana Grande from season 2. This is from season 1. Rami, we protect women not because we don't trust women. We protect women because we don't trust the men. So it's an interesting ending to this episode, because we're introduced to what might be called a toxic masculine figure who appears to be quite misogynistic, and that's demonstrated to his comments directed towards his niece Dina, and the different double standard treatment towards Dina and Rami, and even his love of violence. But basically, they are walking outside and they see a woman possibly being assaulted by a man, and they intervene. And this is his analysis. It's kind of a flip that you would expect. You thought that maybe it's the expectation through this critique of patriarchy and misogyny that this man hates women and blames them for all the ways that violence is directed to them. But no, it's actually men that women should be protected from. And again, we can unpack patriarchy at another time. But this is quite, I think, fascinating. Let me just, to engage this, let me reverse the car of this talk. How did I get involved with Rami? I am this academic who has a journalism community organizing background and was trained to be an analyst of critical media studies, of film and television. I was a TA at USC when I was a PhD student in American Studies and Ethnicity. And I TA'd a class on exploring ethnicity through film, exploring culture through film. We were introducing students a little bit of how the elements of filmmaking, sound, visuals, storytelling influenced what we absorbed and how stories are made through a race, class, gender, religion framework. And so we offered them this critical thinking apparatus to engage TV and film. through, again, ethnicity and culture. And when I met Rami, I actually was writing a report for Pop Culture Collaborative called Huck in Hollywood, exploring 100 years of representing Muslims on TV and film, and came up with this concept of triangulating politics, pop culture, and public opinion to understand how Muslims are produced. And it wasn't the best story, I'm sure you imagine, of what kind of narratives were produced about us and what characters made it to some of the iconic films and thrillers of the 20th and 21st century. And so I was sitting deeply in the space of what was wrong. And again, not necessarily just bad and good normative framework, but what were places that we could create growth from. Now, again, you might not know this, I do have a creative background in writing poetry, creative writing, performing, doing plays, writing some monologues and plays, but I never was part of producing a TV show. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to put academics on blast, but to be trained around the critical analysis of TV shows and never having to make one is a giant gap. And again, we kind of go back to that quote, actually, of critical media literacy about addressing the gap between theory and practice. So how did I enter into this space? Again, I'm meeting Rami when he's producing or he's writing a pilot that he's going to shop around to different networks and studios to see if they would pick it up and greenlight it for a season and now multiple seasons. And he had me look at it. I remember reading the pilot, which if people have seen it, a lot of this will make sense. And it opened in a couple scenes, was towards the beginning, a interaction between the Rami character and a white woman he's dating. And so all these alarm bells were going off about this trope that I wrote about concerning a brown man chasing a white woman as part of this brown Muslim love story narrative, and a trope that I had seen pretty frequently during the beginning of the 21st century. And then he sat me down and he said, Maytha, this is a pilot, and I want you to think about a season. I want you to think about the arcs that characters will embark on, the development and journey of them and their story. And so I had to sit and think about a medium that I was more familiar with, fiction and nonfiction. What would it be like if I thought a character was only what they were on the first page, as opposed to my reflection at the end? And how would I assume what the author's intention was just based on the first page around this character? So again, it was a way that thinking cap I wasn't thinking about when I first entered this space. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of academics don't. But why do I have the strawberries episode? So for the first season of Rami, as he's writing this pilot, he brought me in as a creative advisor. He gets greenlit, and I didn't necessarily know what that title looked like. I didn't know what a writer's room would look like. I knew I might be afforded the opportunity to drop in every now and again. And I said, Rami, why don't you give me the themes that you're interested in hitting this season, and I'll create a syllabus for you. And I did. We had a syllabus, I think, for that season and subsequent seasons, but in particular this one. And then we had a seminar where every week we would check in about something that he had read. And there was something that maybe even off syllabus, I just sent an aside to that was about, okay, get ready for this. I'm going to go kind of like IR poli-sci technical with you all, with a critical lens on it, by the way. An article about IMF loans called structural adjustment programs that came with them conditions for the acceptance or for the deposit of the loan in Egypt. So Egypt, after it was nationalized, for a variety of reasons that we could go into in the decolonial period and the re-entrenchment of um, what you would call maybe neo-colonial and then later neoliberal power, Egypt was in a place where let me back up. For most of these countries that decolonized and became nationalized, there was a question that was hard to navigate, and that was around how to create resources and reserves when historically you've been the point of extraction for the colonial system. That was a tricky one because the response was, let's nationalize, but that didn't deal with the root issue of access to resources and trading and what it meant to still be absorbed in a system that hadn't been radically dismantled. So the West was still the core of economic world order, and the decolonized nations were what have been called the periphery. And so what a lot of these countries had to contend with was that because of this global world economic order, there wasn't a way to really build up reserves, because they've turned into these countries that in the global trade market are expected to produce like a monoculture and put it out into the world. So what happened with Egypt, again, we're talking about this rise of neoliberalism. There was a decline around the state and safety of the middle class. So they sought out an International Monetary Fund loan, and the condition for it, for one of them, was that you're going to turn your wheat fields, which are used for domestic consumption. So wheat is an important foodstuff staple for a country of, now I don't know how many, over 80 million people, and turn them into exotic fruit agricultural land for exportation, mostly to Western countries. And so I was explaining this article to Rami, sent it to him, and I said, this setup is so that people in the West could have strawberries in winter. And that helped him conceptualize this episode 4 of season 1 about what kind of critique can we have around the positioning of an Arab American Muslim as 9/11 happens. And for a kid to try to figure out a world that's presented as a binary of choices, where to go. And this is actually a really crucial episode because it sets up a lot of the journey of the character Rami. Yes, this episode, and Rami talks about it, was very much informed by him growing up in Jersey as an Egyptian. When 9/11 happened, he's around this same age, and he's being introduced to chat rooms. Again, you can see a little bit more when you watch the episode. 9/11 happens, and we see the reaction from his classmates, but also, what is this young little prepubescent kid to do when he's positioned, and like a lot of us, we're positioned in a way to make a choice, whether you are with us or against us. That was the language used by George W. Bush, who has undergone a lot of rehabilitation with a revisionist history about his presidency. And so that was a very damaging framework. Also, when we weren't offered this analysis of why populations outside of the US who might have a critique of America, might have a vendetta against the US, why they would. And the framing of this moment was they hate us for our freedom, but no, maybe they hate us because we've ruined their lives. That could be a pretty substantial reasoning for it. So we were exploring what it was like for a kid to contend with the extremity of responses, from the jingoistic American patriotism to a Osama bin Laden critique, and that liminal area, which I think our show loves to live in, that gray space of, okay, what is the critique, and what can we create out of it? So I wrote this article for Deadline. You can go into more details and see what we're more of how the episode is constructed. Oh, again, like Rami drew from and a lot of what had happened during 9/11 and even dreams that he had. But this was a crucial way to think through, using this critical lens to think through how to creatively tell this story. So another episode, I'll try to wrap up because I didn't realize I was talking as long as I did. In season 2 that I co-wrote with Rami was about the quote unquote evil eye. And actually it was, I think Rami and I were independently thinking about this concept of the way that jealousy is discussed in the West and in the US. So FYI, if you ever love my travel photos, don't tell me you're jealous. Don't tell any Arab you're jealous. Don't tell any Muslim you're jealous, or think that this is a compliment, because it is within a system of, I guess, spiritual choreography, I guess you could say, where an insistence or a feeling, even a subconscious feeling of jealousy, is part of an envy matrix that could take away your blessings or could somehow puncture what is meant for you. So this is in many cultures and traditions. I see folks responding to this. So it's called the eye of envy, the eye of jealousy is called the evil eye. And as you have probably seen in different cultures, again, this has gone from like Greece to the Middle East to basically, I call them we cultures. All over the world, you see this blue eye of protection from the evil eye. And it's actually a really interesting philosophical way of understanding the blessings that come to you through you. And this was my commentary for an article that Uzanlar wrote for the Washington Post and had cute little comics about the evil eye in the workplace, actually. But yeah, so this is definitely a trigger for a lot of us. If you say you're jealous or even jelly, actually, my friend Sarah and I came up with this term "ai," which is like in awe of and in admiration for something that has come your way as an alternative to jelly. And I guess that in itself is creative media literacy. But okay, so we were thinking of this, and how do you explain this concept to an audience that's not familiar with it? Well, there was a perfect story structure that presented itself. Rami was in conversation with our actor, May Kelamawi, who plays the role of Dina, about things that she was going through that maybe the character could investigate or navigate through. And he was also interested in exploring, all of us were, what faith practice looked like for a character that's not Rami's, and what brings you closer, what puts you further apart. And of course, we also couldn't resist bringing in the headscarf, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But so our actor was experiencing alopecia, real hair loss that was, for a lot of women, really hard. I mean, now the Oscars are coming, we know how triggering hair loss, especially for women, is. If you all don't know, I'm referencing Jada and alopecia and the joke that Chris Rock directed towards her. So we thought about doing an episode where the mom was firmly of this belief that any kind of positive sharing would result in the evil eye coming to May Kelamawi. So the episode starts with Maysa, her mother, acknowledging or in shock that she shared on Facebook that she got a scholarship for law school, which is clearly a big deal. And then she talks about the number of likes, like, do you want to ruin your life? Again, this idea that even if you aren't intentional about wanting something, there might be a sense of somebody wanting something that it is meant for you that they want for themselves. And that could affect the trajectory of how the blessing is bestowed or taken away from you. So after that, Dina starts to notice clumps of hair in the shower, clogged showers. And then what ends up happening is that she goes to a seer. And they go through actually a kind of a practice of cleansing and clearing that you might find in different parts of the Middle East, not saying that it's Islamically condoned, or ruqyah, that people talk about sometimes cleansing you of jinns. And actually, I don't know if you guys know, like The Exorcist is kind of based in some of these Lebanese Christian, which are also informed by just how the region deals with jinns or evil spirits coming your way. So yeah, that was the basis of the episode. And then, you know, in a very divergent way, she decides to put the headscarf to cover up the alopecia, not because she's really trying to be religious. And then she encounters a scenario where now she has to respond to how she's being racialized when she's picked up by a tow truck driver who is a Fox News consumer, clearly, or a like hardcore red pillar. I mean, actually, you don't even have to be that. You could just be a liberal and have really misogynistic understandings of Muslim women and their agency. But she encounters some of the most ludicrous stereotypes because she's here wearing a headscarf, again, just to cover the bald spot. And that this also came from, or was informed from, a tow truck experience I had where I was trying to figure out, oh my God, this guy found out I am Arab and he has these crazy assumptions and I just don't want to deal with it. So I'm going to have him drop me off, not at my house because I don't want him to know where I live. And, you know, similarly, she takes off her headscarf to show a bald spot that he is shocked by. And then she puts it back on, which again was an inverse of the story that we've heard about Muslim women finding their freedom through taking it off. And I mean, I think this is still a question of what her relationship to faith is and what the headscarf means, not just to her, I mean, not just to Muslim women, but specifically to her. So now you're seeing how we've used some of this critique, so this critique around how we understand the evil eye and protection from it, and May's own experience with alopecia, my experience with the tow truck driver, larger American cultures, assumptions around, or non-Muslim American cultures, larger assumptions about Muslim women, and created an episode. Okay, so the last case study, which I'm going to try to wrap up quickly because I do want some Q&A time. So in response to the ways that I've noticed we use words online and don't seem to have a common language, not that I'm offering a uniform, universal common language, I wanted to puncture through how we talk about words and key terms online. So I came up with this series funded by Pop Culture Collaborative that captured a lot of my critical brain research analysis and produced hopefully some little bit more bite-sized, snappy videos that range from 3 minutes to 10 to 17 minutes about certain words, key terms that are maybe provocative, sometimes controversial. And you can see the introduction to this key term series on Slow Factory's Instagram page and on their YouTube page. And then we put out one that I'm going to talk to you about in a second called Feral Femme. So these are the ways that I've thought about how to have this critical media literacy with words online, and then how to, I mean, the goal for me is actually to bring people in to produce their own key terms, because I would love to see people break down terms from these 5 pillars that I've mentioned, which is refusing hegemonic homogeneity, which is this idea that a word can mean only one thing to all people, that we acknowledge that words, and I'll go into why and how, over time, in different geographies, in different communities, means something different and take on different meanings. And that's actually what diachronic is about. Diachronic is a look at the evolution of a word as it travels through time and space. And another sort of way of engaging these words is something called explication, which is a drawing out of a word and seeing what meaning is left over. And then again, you all heard about dual vision. This is what open heart critical mind is. And to also have open-ended definitions that are flexible and adaptive. So in unpacking and critiquing the way that we are talking about words, I wanted to offer a more capacious place for us to possibly define in the moment how we understand a word. And so this is closing it all up. This is one feels a little, I don't know, humble brag or whatever, that I'm one of the most proud about, that I in the process of writing a book on, and it is what I'm calling feral femme. And again, you can watch this video, the shorter version, 3-minute one, on Slow Factory's Instagram page, but you can watch the 17-minute one, which I highly recommend because I did a ton of research on this, going from the Platonic Aristotelian period all the way up through now to look at how words like lunacy, crazy, insane, and hysteria developed over time and how they were deployed to mostly pathologize and contain the wildness of womb people, women, femmes. And I also wanted to expand this field of inquiry, this field of study of the wild woman that just gendered the body of the femme and wanted to expand it to any femme energy. And also, I mean, I didn't include this in the video, but I'm just really curious about femme energy in all gendered bodies and what it means to repress it through the most visible example, which is high femme folks. So as you can see, this is some of the graphics of these videos. Now, where did this come from? How did it become a concept or video? Well, I was simply, again, just curious about these terms like lunacy, which means intermittent periods of insanity, triggered by the moon cycle, or sometimes called moon sickness, came out around, I think, the 16th century. Crazy even, what do people say when they're trying to discredit a woman, especially a woman in a relationship, especially in a cis hetero relationship, is, I don't know what happened, she went crazy. And crazy is just a way to automatically end any conversation or automatically end any compassion to have for high femme folks. Hysteria. Hysteria was the one I spent the most time on. It means dysfunction of the womb and goes all the way back to Aristotle and Plato. Again, you can watch this video. Even Hippocrates had a contribution to make about hysteria, how the womb would wander around from the pelvis and attack, or once it touched the brain, then you went hysterical, you went insane, because the womb is not supposed to be there. And the way to get it back into the pelvis was to have heterosexual sex or to be married. And so as I was delving into this exploration, a poem emerged out of me, this idea of this fierceness, of this wildness, of this ungovernable energy that is a refutation to a patriarchal world order that wants to extract and take. And when I'm talking about patriarchy, I'm not talking just about men, and I'm not just talking about masculinity. I'm talking about an order of domination. An order of domination that tries to also gender bodies and put them in a hierarchy of superiority and inferiority. And so somehow all of this made sense, and you can watch this poem and you can hear a bit of it. But what was like the cool creative media literacy was not just producing the Key Term series, but I reached out to our friends at Nora Black, Nora White, such a cool team of folks that produce beautiful, ethical clothing, and wanted to do a collaboration, a capsule around feral femme. Now, how this came about too, which I want to give a shout out to a place where I first performed this poem to like 5,000 folks, mostly women, at United States of Women. When was this? Like 2018. gave this poem. And then afterwards, tons of people came up to me and said, "Are you selling a Feral Femme shirt? I want to buy one." I didn't even think about that, but I could understand the empowering and the centering in that agency of potency of that wildness just by putting this sort of name in. I mean, I'm going to show you how the robe looks here. So this is the robe. It says Feral Femme on the arm sleeves, and then has the ending quote from the poem on it. "We will speak truth to domination because we are power. They call us crazy, hysterical lunatics now, but soon they will call us freedom." And the vision around this is I took pictures of sunsets from Southern California that were thrilling to me, that were so evocative. And I use them. I mean, this is also like the sacral colors, if you're into chakra stuff. But I used it to also think about the sunsetting of patriarchy as a color scheme. And before I was debating whether or not it would go all the way down as this large print. Wanted it to be gold for a variety of reasons we could talk about. But there was also this spiral option that I still love, but I was debating between them. But I wanted people to see this in big caps. I wanted it to create a ruckus. I wanted it to be eye-catching. And I'm telling you, everywhere I go, people stop and ask to read this. And by the way, you can buy either one of these too, and I'll show you that site. And it's opened up really interesting, critical discussions based on a creative project that melded the two together. And it's almost like, what is the distinction between the two? And again, this is why I am really operating under this framework of critical media literacy, because for me, it is an acknowledgement, even if I don't say the word, of the critical work that it takes to make creative work that is powerful and literate and out into the space of this mediated world between allegedly just audience and producer. But again, I hope this whole talk also offered you an understanding that I think those areas are blurred. I think that there is a more liminal space that we can live in, where we are the creator and we are the content consumer. But even in the consumption, we are in an active process of unfolding of creation. So I think I have 2 minutes left, but do people have questions, or do we go for longer? What's the scenario? This is cool, but I don't know how
you can go for longer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Covered the speakers. So media literacy can mean a variety of things. This is from Poppy. Media literacy can be, again, it's a term that is and continues to be contested. I'm part of this USC Civic Media Fellowship. And actually, we just had a call the other day thinking about how we define media or civic media. Media is a plural of medium, so multiple mediums, and how to read through that multiple medium. And then the critical in front of it is having a critical lens on reading that the space where things are, or content, or ways of being are funneled through. I don't know if that helps you, Poppy, get a clearer picture. Being an consumerism industrial designer, I feel lost. Oh, Jorge, yeah, I'm interested in talking about this. So yeah, going back to Jorge, love the unfolding because being an anti-consumerist industrial designer, I feel lost. I'm curious what you mean by industrial. And I think that's also part of the next trajectory of the work that I'm thinking through, is not just decolonization, but deindustrialization as a way to think about a liberatory future or a liberatory present. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm sure there were questions that were happening, but I was very much embedded in, or I was really absorbed in talking through these slides. Any questions? Questions? Oh, there are questions in the Q&A section. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Should I say people's names? Do you want me to say your names? Is that okay? Okay. Suleiman says, without erasing lived experience of ableism and racism, how can we ensure that disability and disabled people are centered in conversations and solutions for critical media literacy, and ensure that accessibility is rooted in everything we do for our radical and collective liberation? Excellent question. As somebody who is able-bodied and not disabled, I take my cues from the disabled communities, and I've learned so much about accessibility and decentering the normalized body. I'll say that, as a lot of you know, my brother is on the spectrum, and he has been for quite a long time, going through multiple kinds of diagnoses before autism or being on the spectrum was introduced. And what's been really interesting, when he was having surgery and post-op, they were trying to understand what his pain level was. And this is like decades ago, even before we had more than text-based cell phones. They showed him pictures of faces, what we might call today emojis, to select what aligned most with what he was feeling. And then later, of course, we would get this world of emojis. It's interesting. I've been listening to discussions about how the harm of behavior modification training and the focus on forcing folks who have a different way of communicating to be verbal. And I noticed that my brother loves and thrives online in ways that he doesn't want to, or it doesn't feel right to do in person and in communication. So I don't know if this is answering your question, but I know that, yes, there have been more standard procedures around this, like accessibility, I think, I forgot to do this too. Oh my God, I forgot to mention that I am now a tan, light brown skinned, dark haired, long hair, Arab, Middle Eastern woman with small gold earrings and gold necklaces strewn across my neck, with a one-shouldered gray top. And I'm in a room with a bookcase in the back, about 5 levels, and a plant on top. And I was also showing the robe that is on the back. So I myself definitely failed to offer that. But again, there are so many incredible disability activists. I would rather point to them than offer a response. Do you see any trends where journalists or mainstream media creators, this is Aaron, openly acknowledge their identities, especially their power and privilege and the impact it has on their creation, in order to disrupt notions of that content can be crafted without bias? Great question, Aaron. So how I learned to think about power and position in the generativity of information was actually through anthropology, because there was more of a renegade movement in anthropology, considering that they were confronting how they were crucial for colonial projects to subvert that history, or to redeem themselves from that history as a form of, I guess, intellectual reparations, to one, acknowledge, and two, change the practice. And so what is, or should, I think, or be standard, or in my fields, or definitely is something called self-reflexivity. And that is at least a paragraph, at least a substantial part of a methods section, acknowledging the ways that you're either connected or divergent from what you're studying, and being very clear about the quote unquote constellation of identities, of context is that you bring in your framework, analysis, and lens on a topic. I think, I'm trying to remember, people can help me out in the chat. I think I did see, and I was shocked by this very recently, shocked in a pleasant way, the acknowledgement of that as part of a byline for some media story. I don't know if I'm making that up or that did happen. Jennifer, have you ever created work that no longer represents your views or who you are today? I find myself hesitant to share my creative, expressive knowing I won't always have the same beliefs as my younger self. How do you move past that fear? Oh, this is major, I think, because I contend with this every time some media comes out, and I try to give myself and other people grace. So that's also part of why creative media literacy is such a profound practice, because as you're creating the work, and as I said, when you're producing TV, you have a much different lens on what kind of critical academic analysis you can have. You realize that it's an iterative ideation process, and it's dialogic. I should have included that as well. When you're putting content out in the world, again, it is a refutation of this notion that information is this, or creativity is this isolated experience that only emerges from the one singular being. But creativity is a process in conversation, in community. That's how I believe my greatest ideas are, not just through collaboration, but they're when there's feedback, things are offered back and forth in the process of creativity. Now, unfortunately, we do have a very uncharitable social media audience space that can't see things in context. And then this is actually part of what I'd love to push people to think about. And again, I'm not the beacon of all the solutions. I'm here too, as part of this creative media literacy offering, to be in dialogue with you all about what that could look like in its most robust form. What would it look like for us not to take one tweet and have an analysis about the whole personhood and the lived experience of that person based on that tweet? What would it look like for us to put more information in conversation, and then to take a second again with the open heart and say, wait a second, what is not said? What is omitted? What are things I don't know? The critical mind will see all the things in front of it and make an analysis. And again, I think we are actually in an overly critical mind space when we're online. And what does it take to engage the critical heart? And I know, and this is heartbreaking, because I do talk to a lot of Gen Z folks that they don't even want to talk up in class because they're afraid of the critique around the learning process. And a lot of us in the organizing world, this is kind of related to being an artist, because I think organizing is social artistry. A lot of us say we're so glad that our political education came from being in person, where we could test out ideas. So now when we have, I think, a pretty uncharitable space, one, we can operate with generosity. We can engage that open heart as we have our own critical mind. That's something we can do. We can offer, not just to ourselves in a process, but really make it a practice when we see anything online. But also, you can take that creation offline and really be in community about art and creation, because I think we're still in the space where we're trying to figure all of it out. And for all my designers in the room, what are ways that we could create social media experience that privileges the open heart and critical mind and allows for generativity? And then for my really dope designers, how can we make new social media platforms that do that? Is that possible? Yeah. Yes.
Hi, I'm coming back with you. It's just to manage expectations. It's 1:10 p.m. EST, so we are over time. Our American Sign Language interpreters can only stay another minute.
Okay.
For all the things regarding access, we will be adding the subtitle, like the closed captioning. Sorry, we will be adding closed captioning to the post-production of the video. And for everyone else who came on for their lunch break, I'm sure, those who live in the East Coast, will have to be leaving us soon. So what I suggest, Maytha, is that we give you the questions and we can maybe answer them by writing and then share the responses with our community.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, have
Or
you back
maybe
for
another
another
quick
class.
video. Yeah. Maybe another, response quick video, or also you have me on Instagram.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, the American Sign Language team. Thank you so much for being here with us. Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Joshua. We also, our other interpreter had left already. I didn't have a chance to thank them. But yes, no, I didn't mean to cut you, but Maytha, what you're saying is so profound. First of all, the class is amazing. We've heard so many cool comments in chat. So for those of you asking about the chat can be saved and will be shared in Slack. So if you want to join our Slack, please do so. The information is in the newsletter, and I'm sure our team is going to put it here in the chat. And Maytha, we will be sharing the Q&A with you so that you can continue, responding at your leisure. And then, of course, we can maybe either create a question and answer post on the Slow Journal or have you involved in another class. Once again, as you know, you are, cherished within the Slow Factory team. You are soon joining us as an advisor. We will be making that announcement very soon, but we are also working with you on another activation or another project, Planet Justice, that will be announced soon. And in the meantime, we hope to have you back to, kind of push this further, even as you keep pushing it further and further. And we're keep being so amazed by what you're saying, especially the relationship between academia and the real world. And you are creating such an important bridge between the world of academia and thoughts and the world of practice and what's practically being executed in Hollywood or on Netflix or in other projects. So thank you for shining the light on that. And, I'm so sorry to cut and to be like,
Oh, no, it's okay. Totally fine. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be in conversation with the Slow Factory community and the whole team and staff.
We are so grateful to have you. I'm so sorry, my video is not pinned, but I am on video, and I wanted to just thank you personally. You just started right away. I wanted to make an introduction. We'll hopefully have that. I mean, you don't need an introduction because you've already had a class with us, but I wanted to share our excitement within the Slow Factory community to having you, Dr. Maytha, with us today, talking about creative critical media literacy, because we added the word creative, and the idea of adding the word creative was that it's not just about criticizing, it's about also what do we create. And you really did touch on that, specifically with the work you've done with Rami, and we're so grateful for you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, anyone, please join us on Slack, continue the conversation on Slack. And if you love OpenEDU, please consider donating. All of this is made through the generous donations of everyone who's joined OpenEDU. OpenEDU is running, all semester, and we are working on next semester for a summer program and the fall. So please do make a donation if you can, and send it to your employer and have them make a donation as well. So thank you so much, Maytha. Any last words you would like to share?
Oh, no, it's all good. Feel free to be in conversation at Maytha Al Hassan, Instagram, not really on Twitter, but there I am. I'm so excited.
Yes, definitely follow Maytha. We're going to send the links to whatever links you want to send, do send them to us. We will have a recap newsletter with for everyone who joined the class and everyone who registered and couldn't join the class. They will have also access to that. And everyone asked about nor black nor white. We did leave the link, but it was like all over the chat. So please do link us to these items.
Okay, cool. Yay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Peace.
Bye.